What happens when a man who once saved lives refuses to pick up his stethoscope again? When a teacher with secrets arrives in a dying frontier town? And when one sick child forces them both to confront the past they're running from? This is a story of second chances, healing hearts, and finding love in the most unexpected places. If you love slow burn romance with deep emotional journeys, you're in for a treat. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more heartwarming Western tales. You're no doctor anymore. When broken army surgeon met teacher who changed everything. The scream cut through the Wyoming afternoon like a blade through silk. Marcus Stone reined in his gelding on the ridge above Millbrook, his weathered hands tightening on the leather. Below, near the abandoned schoolhouse, a woman knelt beside a makeshift shelter that looked ready to collapse with the next strong wind. She was hammering at boards with desperate fury, each strike echoing across the empty prairie. He should ride on, mind his own business. That had been his rule for 4 years now, ever since the woman's hammer missed its mark and struck her thumb. Even from a quarter-mile away, Marcus could see her shoulders shake, but she didn't cry out again. Didn't throw down the tool and give up. Instead, she wrapped her injured hand in her skirt and picked up another board. Something twisted in Marcus's chest, something he'd thought was dead. The shelter she was building wouldn't last a week. Hell, it wouldn't last a day once the autumn storms hit. The boards were warped, split, held together by bent nails and pure stubbornness. It was the kind of hopeless enterprise that got people killed on the frontier. But she kept working. Marcus touched his heels to his horse's flanks and rode down from the ridge. As he approached, he could see her more clearly. Mid-20s auburn hair, escaping from a practical bun, wearing a traveling dress that had seen better days. Her face was streaked with dust and determination. She looked up as he dismounted, wariness flashing in green eyes. Her hand moved instinctively toward a small carpet bag beside her. "Ma'am," Marcus said, removing his hat, "didn't mean to startle you." "You didn't." Her voice was cultured, educated. Eastern, maybe. "I was just making some repairs." Marcus looked at the collection of broken lumber she'd somehow coaxed into the rough shape of 3 walls. "Mind if I ask what you're repairing?" Color rose in her cheeks. "It's meant to be a shelter. Temporary, of course." "Of course, saw." He studied the structure with a rancher's practical eye. The foundation was actually decent. She'd chosen level ground, positioned it to avoid the worst of the wind. But the materials... "Ma'am, I don't mean to be forward, but that timber won't hold through the first real storm." Her chin lifted. "It's what I have to work with." "I can see that." Marcus looked around at the scattered boards, the rusty nails, the determination that was going to get her killed. "What happened to the school?" "Closed 6 months ago. The teacher left." She didn't meet his eyes. "The position I was promised no longer exists." Ah, another dreamer lured west by promises that turned to dust. Marcus had seen it too many times, people arriving with hope and finding only harsh reality. "Got anywhere else to go?" "No." The word came out flat, final. "So I'm making do." That was when Marcus noticed her hands, bandaged with strips torn from a petticoat, blood seeping through the makeshift wrapping. She'd been working for hours, maybe days, trying to build something from nothing, just like he'd been doing for 4 years. The thought hit him like a physical blow. The careful routine of his ranch, the methodical work that kept his hands busy and his mind empty, wasn't that just another kind of shelter built from broken boards? "Ma'am, I'm Marcus Stone. My ranch is 3 miles west." He gestured toward the horizon. "I've got good lumber at the house. Strong boards, proper nails. Would you let me help you build this right?" Suspicion flickered in her eyes. "Why? Because you remind me of myself. Because I recognize that particular kind of stubborn courage. Because watching you try to build hope from scraps is breaking something inside me that I thought was already broken. Because that storm's coming," he said instead, nodding toward the dark clouds building on the northwestern horizon. "And good lumber's wasted if it just sits in a barn while someone freezes to death." She studied his face for a long moment. Marcus kept his expression neutral, letting her take his measure. He was used to people's wariness. A man his size living alone had to earn trust the hard way. "I can't pay you," she said finally. "Didn't ask for payment." "Then what do you want?" The honest answer would have sent her running, What he wanted was to feel useful again, to remember what it was like to build something instead of just maintaining what remained, to silence the voice in his head that whispered he was no good to anyone. Just to help, he said. Another long pause. Then she nodded just once. My name is Eleanor Walsh, but most people call me Nora. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Walsh. Marcus tipped his hat. I'll be back before sunset with materials. Meantime, might want to rest those hands. He was halfway back to his horse when she called after him. Mr. Stone. He turned. Thank you. Something in her voice made him pause. Gratitude, yes, but underneath it was surprise, as if kindness was the last thing she'd expected to find in this empty place. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said. Wait till we see if I remember how to build something that'll stand. He rode home with purpose for the first time in years. The stone ranch materialized out of the evening shadows like something from a half-remembered dream. Nora had walked the 3 miles in gathering dusk, following the directions Marcus had given her. Her feet ached in boots that hadn't been designed for prairie walking, and her bandaged hands throbbed with each heartbeat. But the ranch was real, solid, the kind of place that spoke of care and attention, even if it felt somehow empty. Marcus emerged from the barn as she approached, carrying an armload of lumber. In the lamplight spilling from the house, she could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair going gray at the temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. He moved with the easy competence of a man comfortable with hard work. Miss Walsh, he set down the boards and approached her. You walked all the way out here. You said to come by if I needed anything. She gestured toward her makeshift shelter, which was already listing dangerously in the evening breeze. I need a roof over my head tonight. Marcus's jaw tightened. Should have thought of that. Got a spare room in the house if you don't mind. Simple accommodations. I couldn't. Ma'am, that shelter of yours won't last till midnight. You can have your pride or you can have your life. Your choice, what? The bluntness of it stung, but he wasn't wrong. Even from here, she could see her poor construction swaying in the wind. Just for tonight, she said. Just for tonight. He led her up the porch steps and into a house that felt like a held breath. Everything was clean, orderly, functional, but there was no warmth to it, no personal touches. It was as if someone had carefully removed all traces of joy from the rooms. Kitchen's through there, Marcus said, gesturing. Guest room's upstairs, second door on the right. There's water for washing and clean linens on the bed. And thank you. Nora hesitated. Will I see you in the morning to finish the shelter? Something flickered in his dark eyes. Told you I'd help. I keep my word. She was halfway up the stairs when a sound from outside made them both freeze. Hoofbeats coming fast. A horse being ridden hard through the darkness. Marcus moved to the window, his hand dropping automatically to the rifle mounted beside the door. Rider coming. Sounds urgent. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Frantic pounding on the door followed. Mr. Stone, please. It's Tommy Bradford. He's real sick. Marcus opened the door to reveal a boy of perhaps 14, had askew, eyes wide with panic. Slow down, Billy, Marcus said. What's wrong with Tommy? Been burning with fever all about. Ma sent for Doc Harrison, but he's over in Cheyenne. Won't be back for 3 days. Billy's voice cracked. Pa says Tommy might not have 3 days. Nora felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd seen fever like that before during her time at the mission school. Children burning up from the inside, parents helpless to do anything but watch. How old is Tommy? She asked, coming down the stairs. Billy looked surprised to see her, but answered readily. 8, ma'am. He's just a little fella. Marcus was already reaching for his coat. I'll ride over to see what I can do. Billy, tell your pa I'll be there directly. Wait, Nora touched Marcus's arm. What exactly do you mean by see what you can do? He went very still. Just comfort measures. Keep him cool. Make sure he's drinking water. That's all. That's all anyone can do without a doctor. There was something in his voice, a careful neutrality that spoke of walls built high and strong. Nora had spent enough time around secrets to recognize them. I have some medical training, she said quietly, from the mission school where I taught. If you think it would help. Marcus's face had gone completely blank. Medical training. Basic nursing, fever management, wound care. I'm not a doctor, but... No, the word came out sharp, final. Billy, tell your parents I'll be there soon. Miss Walsh, you should get some rest. He was dismissing her, but Billy's panicked face stayed in Nora's mind as Marcus strode toward the barn to saddle a fresh horse. A child was dying, and Marcus Stone, despite his obvious care for his neighbors, had just refused help that might save a life. Nora stood in the empty kitchen, listening to the sound of hooves fading into the distance, and wondered what kind of man turned away from a sick child. She couldn't sleep. Nora lay in the narrow guest bed, staring at the ceiling and thinking about fever-bright eyes and a small face, about parents keeping vigil beside a bedside, about all the children she'd nursed through illness at the mission school and the few she hadn't been able to save. At midnight, she gave up on sleep and crept downstairs. The kitchen was dark except for the dying embers in the stove. Nora lit a lamp and began quietly gathering supplies, clean cloth for cool compresses, willow bark from the medicinal herbs hanging in the pantry, a bottle of pure alcohol for sterilization. She was searching for a suitable bag to carry everything when she heard hoofbeats returning. Marcus came through the door looking haggard. His clothes were rumpled, his face drawn with exhaustion, and something that looked like defeat. "How is he?" Nora asked softly. Marcus started not having expected to find her in his kitchen. "Fever's worse. Kid's burning up, but he's so weak he can barely open his eyes." He slumped against the doorframe. "His parents they're scared." "They should be." Nora finished packing her improvised medical kit. "High fever in children can be dangerous very quickly." "I know that." Marcus's voice was raw. "You think I don't know that?" The pain in his tone stopped her cold. This wasn't just neighborly concern. This was personal. "Mr. Stone," she said carefully, "forgive me for asking, but are you a doctor?" The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. "No," Marcus said finally, "not anymore." "But you were." Once, he turned away, but not before she saw the devastation in his eyes, long time ago. "Then you could help Tommy." "No," the word came out like a physical blow. "I can't. I won't. A child is dying. Children die." The words were spoken so quietly she almost missed them. Sometimes there's nothing anyone can do. Sometimes even doctors can't save them. Understanding hit her like a cold wave. The empty house, the careful absence of personal touches, the way he'd flinched when she mentioned her medical training. "You lost someone," she whispered. "A child." Marcus's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "My daughter and my wife. 4 years ago, cholera outbreak at Fort Carson." His voice was steady, clinical, as if he were discussing the weather. "I was the post physician. I had all the training, all the knowledge, all the equipment a frontier doctor could want. And I watched them die anyway. Watched them burn with fever, just like that little boy is burning right now. Held my daughter's hand while she—" He stopped, jaw working. "Medical training doesn't mean anything when you can't save the people who matter most." Nora's throat closed. She recognized that particular brand of self-blame, the way guilt could hollow out a person from the inside. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't." Marcus's voice was sharp. "Don't apologize, and don't try to convince me that it wasn't my fault. I've heard it all before." "I wasn't going to." He looked up surprised. "I was going to say that your daughter would want you to save Tommy." The color drained from Marcus's face. "You don't know anything about my daughter. I know she was loved by a father who became a doctor to help people. I know she'd want that father to help other children even if he couldn't help her. Get out." The words were spoken softly, but there was steel underneath them. "Get your things and get out of my house." Nora didn't move. "There's a difference between honoring the dead and letting guilt kill the living, Mr. Stone. I said get out. Tommy Bradford is 8 years old, the same age your daughter was when she died." Marcus went very, very still. He has parents who love him, a father who's probably pacing the floor right now, feeling as helpless as you did 4 years ago, a mother who's trying to be strong while her heart breaks. Nora's voice was gentle but relentless. "You can't save your daughter, but you could save him." "What if I can't?" The words were torn from somewhere deep inside him. "What if I try and he dies anyway? What if—" "Then at least you tried." Nora picked up her bag of supplies. At least his parents will know that someone with skill and knowledge fought for their son's life. She moved toward the door, then stopped. I'm going to the Bradford place, Mr. Stone, with or without you. But that little boy's best chance of seeing morning is if the man who was trained to save lives remembers how to pick up his stethoscope again. She left him standing in the kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of his failures and the weight of one more chance to make a difference. The night air was cold against her face as she set out walking toward town, praying with every step that Marcus Stone would find the courage to be a doctor again.
Well, Caesar.
She made it halfway to town before she heard hoofbeats behind her. Marcus pulled his horse to a stop beside her, a leather medical bag secured behind his saddle. In the moonlight, his face was carved from stone, but his hands were steady on the reins. You'll ride behind me, he said without preamble. It's faster. Nora didn't argue. She let him pull her up behind the saddle, her arms circling his waist as they set off toward the Bradford place at a gallop. The ride passed in silence, but she could feel the tension in his body, the way his breathing had gone carefully controlled. This was costing him everything. The Bradford house was lit up like a beacon against the darkness. Every window glowed yellow, and she could see figures moving inside a family, keeping vigil. Marcus dismounted first and helped her down. His medical bag was already in his hand, but he stood frozen at the gate. I haven't practiced medicine in 4 years, he said quietly. It'll come back to you. What if... The front door burst open. A man in his 30s stumbled onto the porch, his face desperate with hope and fear. Dr. Stone Billy said we didn't know if you'd... Words failed him. Marcus straightened his shoulders. When he spoke, his voice had changed, taken on an authority that seemed to come from some deep place inside him. Take me to your son, Mr. Bradford. They followed Thomas Bradford into a house that smelled of fear and sickness. In a small bedroom off the main room, a woman sat beside a narrow bed where a small boy lay motionless, except for the rapid rise and fall of his chest. Tommy Bradford was burning with fever. Even from the doorway, Nora could see the flush on his cheeks, the way his lips moved soundlessly as delirium took hold. How long has he been like this? Marcus asked, moving to the bedside with sudden purpose. Since this morning, the boy's mother whispered. Started with a stomach ache, then the fever came on fast. Marcus opened his medical bag the first time in 4 years and withdrew a stethoscope that looked well-worn but carefully maintained. His hands shook slightly as he placed it on the child's chest. Pulse is rapid but strong, he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. Breathing's labored, but not critically so. He examined the boy with practiced efficiency, checking pupils, feeling for swollen glands pressing gently on his abdomen. Slowly, the rigid control in his face began to ease as muscle memory took over. Miss Walsh, he said without looking up, I'll need cool water and clean cloths for his compresses. Mrs. Bradford, has he been able to keep any fluids down? Some water, she said. Not much. That's good. We need to keep him hydrated. Marcus straightened, and for the first time since entering the room, he looked directly at Tommy's parents. I believe your son has what we call gastric fever. It's serious but treatable if we act quickly. The relief on their faces was painful to watch. What do you need us to do? Thomas Bradford asked. First, we bring that fever down before it causes lasting damage. Miss Walsh, you said you have nursing experience. Yes. Good. I'll need your help. And for the next 6 hours, they worked together beside Tommy Bradford's bed. Marcus's hands grew steady as he fell back into the rhythm of medicine, checking vital signs, adjusting treatments, making the 100 small decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. Nora proved herself an able assistant, anticipating his needs and working with quiet competence. She showed Thomas Bradford how to position his son for easier breathing. She helped Mrs. Bradford prepare the herbal teas that would ease nausea and replenish lost fluids. As dawn approached, Tommy's fever finally broke. The boy opened his eyes, weak but lucid, and asked for his mother in a voice that was thread but clear. Mrs. Bradford burst into tears. Her husband stood with his arm around her shoulders, staring at Marcus as if he were witnessing a miracle. Thank you, Thomas Bradford said, his voice hoarse with emotion. Thank you for giving us our son back. Marcus packed his instruments with careful precision, not meeting anyone's eyes. Keep him on clear liquids for the next day or two. If the fever returns, send for me immediately. Of course we will. Bradford clasped Marcus's hand. Doc, I don't know how we can ever repay you. No payment necessary. Marcus picked up his bag. Just take care of him. Outside, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Marcus and Nora walked to their horses in silence, both exhausted but oddly exhilarated. You saved his life, Nora said as they mounted. We saved his life, Marcus corrected quietly. Couldn't have done it alone. They rode back toward the ranch as the sun climbed higher, painting the prairie gold and amber. Neither spoke, but the silence between them had changed. It was no longer the careful distance of strangers, but something deeper. A recognition. Marcus, Nora said as they approached his property. He looked at her, and she saw that the walls in his eyes had cracked. Not broken, that would take time, but cracked enough to let in light. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For remembering how to be a doctor. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. Anna, my daughter, she wanted to be a doctor too. Used to play with my stethoscope, pretend to examine her dolls. He smiled, and it was the first real smile Nora had seen from him. She would have liked you. I would have liked her too. They reached the ranch as the morning was settling into its stride. Marcus helped her down from the horse, and their hands lingered together for a moment longer than necessary. Miss Walsh, he said, I believe I owe you a proper shelter. I believe you do, Dr. Stone. This time when he smiled, it reached his eyes. 3 weeks later, Nora's shelter had become a small but sturdy cabin, complete with a stone chimney and real glass windows that Marcus had ordered from Cheyenne. More importantly, it had become a makeshift schoolroom. Word of Tommy Bradford's recovery had spread through Millbrook and the surrounding ranches. Within a week, Marcus found himself with a steady stream of patients, nothing serious, mostly minor injuries and seasonal ailments that the absent town doctor might have handled then, and somehow Nora had begun teaching again. It started with the Bradford children. Mrs. Bradford had mentioned that Tommy and his sister had missed months of schooling, and Nora had offered to help them catch up. Then the Hendersons brought their 3 children. The Rodriguezes followed despite the 2-hour ride from their ranch. Now every weekday morning, a dozen children gathered in Nora's cabin for lessons. And every afternoon, Marcus could be found there too, treating whatever medical concerns their parents might have. They made an unlikely pair, the guilt-ridden former Army surgeon and the Eastern teacher with secrets of her own. But they worked well together, falling into a rhythm that felt natural despite its newness. On this particular afternoon, Marcus was stitching up a cut on rancher Pete Donnelly's arm, while Nora helped the younger children with their arithmetic. The cabin was warm with the sounds of learning and healing children reciting multiplication tables, the scratch of pencils on slates, the quiet conversation between doctor and patient. Dr. Donnelly was saying, my wife wanted me to ask if you'd consider coming by the ranch regular like. Mary's expecting again, and after what happened with the last one. Marcus tied off the last stitch with practiced efficiency. I'll ride over next week to examine her. These early appointments are important. Much obliged. Donnelly rolled down his sleeve. Feels good having a real doctor in these parts again. After Donnelly left, Marcus began cleaning his instruments while Nora supervised the children's afternoon recess outside. Through the window, he could see her kneeling beside young Sally Henderson, bandaging a scraped knee with the same gentle competence she'd shown the night they saved Tommy. Mr. Stone, he turned to find Rebecca Bradford, Tommy's older sister, standing in the doorway with a book in her hands. What is it, Rebecca? Miss Walsh has been teaching us about different places in the world, but we don't have any maps. She said you might have some since you traveled with the Army. Marcus hesitated. Most of his personal belongings from his military days were packed away in the attic, buried beneath layers of dust and painful memories. But the hopeful look on Rebecca's face reminded him of Anna, who had loved to trace their fingers across maps and imagine adventures in faraway places. I might have something, and he said, I'll look tonight. Thank you, Rebecca beamed and scampered back outside. That evening, Marcus climbed to the attic for the first time since moving to the ranch. The space was cramped and dim, filled with the accumulated memories of a life he'd tried to forget. There, beneath a canvas tarp, he found his old military trunk. Inside were maps as he'd promised. Detailed surveys of Western territories, hand-drawn charts of river systems, carefully notated medical texts. But underneath the professional materials were more personal treasures, letters from home, photographs from his wedding day, and Anna's drawings. His daughter had loved to sketch flowers, animals, people. Her childish artwork was scattered throughout his medical journals, little decorations she'd added when he wasn't watching. Here was a smiling horse drawn in the margin of a treatise on field surgery. There a family of stick figures next to his notes on treating gunshot wounds. Marcus found himself smiling despite the ache in his chest. Anna had made everything brighter, even his most serious medical texts. He was carefully gathering the maps when he heard hoofbeats approaching at speed. Through the attic window, he could see a rider pushing his horse hard through the gathering dusk. By the time Marcus made it downstairs, the rider was dismounting at his gate. It was Jake Sutton, from the Double S ranch, hat in hand and worry written across his weathered face. "Doc Stone, my apologies for calling so late, but we've got trouble out at the ranch. Several of the hands have come down sick all at once. High fever, stomach troubles. The boss is worried it might be something catching." Marcus was already reaching for his coat. "How many men affected?" 5, maybe 6, started 2 days ago. Enough for an outbreak. Marcus felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "I'll come immediately. Is Miss Walsh still at the schoolhouse?" "Saw lamplight when I rode past." "Good. Jake, I'll need you to ride back ahead of me. Tell your cook to boil all drinking water and keep the sick men isolated as much as possible. I'll be there within the hour." As Jake rode off, Marcus headed for Nora's cabin. He found her grading papers by lamplight, her auburn hair catching the warm glow. "Marcus," she looked up immediately, alert. "What's wrong?" "Possible disease outbreak at the Double S. Multiple cases with similar symptoms." He was already thinking through treatment protocols, supply needs. "I'll be riding out there tonight." Nora was on her feet, reaching for her coat. "I'll come with you." "It could be dangerous. If it's something contagious, then you'll need someone with nursing experience." Her voice was calm, practical. "Besides, you said it yourself, we work well together." Marcus studied her face in the lamplight. 3 weeks of working side by side had taught him to read her expressions, and what he saw now was determination backed by genuine concern. "It could be a long night," he warned. "Then we'd better get started." They rode through the darkness toward the Double S ranch, following trails that Marcus had learned during his years in Wyoming. The night was clear but cold, with a sharp bite of autumn promising winter's approach. "Marcus," Nora said during a brief rest to water their horses, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That first night when you came to help Tommy, you said you weren't a doctor anymore. But you've been practicing for weeks now. What changed?" Marcus was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I stopped being a doctor the day Anna died. Not officially, I never surrendered my license or anything formal like that. But in my mind, I was done. Finished." He adjusted his horse's bridle with careful precision. "But watching you work that night, seeing how you fought for Tommy, even though you barely knew him, it reminded me of why I became a doctor in the first place. To help people. To heal." The distinction seemed important to him. "There's a difference between treating symptoms and actually healing someone. I'd forgotten that." They reached the Double S ranch near midnight. The main house blazed with light, and Marcus could see figures moving urgently between the buildings. Ranch owner Samuel Morrison met them at the gate, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by obvious worry. "Doc, thank God you're here. We've got 7 men down now, and I'm thinking this might be more serious than we first thought." Marcus dismounted and helped Nora down. "Tell me about the symptoms." "Started with stomach cramps and nausea. Then high fever, weakness. A couple of the boys are talking out of their heads now." "Have they all eaten the same meals?" "Far as I know, chuck wagons have been feeding the whole crew together." Marcus exchanged glances with Nora. Food poisoning was possible, but the progression Morrison described sounded more serious. "Where are the affected men?" "Bunkhouse. We moved the healthy hands to the barn for now." The bunkhouse was a scene from Marcus's worst memories of military medicine. 7 men lay on narrow bunks, several tossing restlessly with fever, while others lay ominously still. The air was thick with the smell of sickness and fear. But this time was different. This time he wasn't facing the unknown alone. "Nora," Marcus said quietly, "I need you to help me examine each patient systematically. We need to determine what we're dealing with before we can treat it effectively." She nodded and began moving toward the nearest bunk with calm efficiency. For the next 2 hours, they worked their way through the sick men Marcus diagnosing, while Nora took notes and prepared treatments. Gradually, a pattern emerged. It's not food poisoning, Marcus said during a brief consultation outside the bunkhouse. The symptoms are too uniform, too severe. I think we're looking at bacterial dysentery. How serious? Serious. Without proper treatment, some of these men could die. But if we act quickly, we can save them all. What do you need? Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. No questions about his capabilities, no doubt about his diagnosis. Just complete faith in his medical judgment. Clean water, lots of it. Salts to replace what they have lost through dehydration. And we'll need to maintain strict hygiene protocols to prevent further spread. They worked through the night, moving from patient to patient with water and carefully prepared electrolyte solutions. Marcus taught Morrison's cook how to prepare rice water and clear broths that wouldn't further irritate damaged digestive systems. Nora organized a rotation of healthy ranch hands to help maintain round-the-clock care. By dawn, the crisis had passed. Fevers were breaking and the delirium was clearing. Two of the sickest men were sitting up and asking for food. "How did you know?" Morrison asked as they prepared to leave. "What to do, I mean. Doc Harrison probably would have bled them or given them laudanum." "Experience," Marcus said simply. "I saw a lot of dysentery in the Army. The key is replacing fluids and supporting the body's natural healing process." "Well, you saved my crew. I won't forget it." As they rode back toward Millbrook in the morning light, Nora was unusually quiet. Marcus found himself watching her profile, noting the way exhaustion had softened the determined set of her jaw. "Nora, everything all right?" She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You were magnificent back there." "We both were." "No." She turned to face him fully. "I mean, yes, we work well together. But Marcus, the way you took command of that situation, the way you knew exactly what needed to be done, that's not just medical training. That's a true calling." Something shifted in Marcus's chest. For 4 years, he'd been running from his identity as a doctor, seeing it only as a reminder of his failures. But working alongside Nora, he was beginning to remember what it felt like to save lives instead of losing them. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about what you said that first night, about honoring the dead versus letting guilt kill the living. And Anna loved helping people. Even as a little girl, she was always bandaging her dolls, trying to fix anything that looked broken." He smiled at the memory. "Maybe the best way to honor her memory isn't to stop being a doctor. Maybe it's to be a better one." Nora's hand reached across the space between their horses to touch his briefly. "She'd be proud of you." "I hope so." They were approaching the outskirts of Millbrook when they saw the other rider. A man in a fine black coat, riding a horse that had clearly traveled far and fast. He saw them coming and changed course to intercept them. "Dr. Stone." The stranger's voice carried education and authority. "My name is Dr. Henry Cartwright. I need to speak with you." Marcus felt every muscle in his body go tense. He knew that name, knew it well. Dr. Cartwright had been the chief medical officer at Fort Carson during the cholera outbreak, the man who had overseen Marcus's desperate, futile attempts to save his family. "Dr. Cartwright," Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. "What brings you to Wyoming?" "You do, actually." Cartwright's eyes moved between Marcus and Nora, taking in their rumpled clothes and obvious exhaustion. "I've been tracking your activities for several weeks now. Treating patients, performing surgery, operating what amounts to an unlicensed medical practice. What's your point?" "My point is that you're needed elsewhere. There's a position opening at Denver General Hospital Chief of Surgery. The board has specifically requested your services." Marcus felt the earth shift beneath him. "I'm not interested." "Before you refuse, consider this: Denver General serves over 50,000 people. Here in this backwater, you might treat a few dozen patients in a good month. The mathematics of medical need are quite simple." "So is the mathematics of contentment," Nora said quietly. Cartwright turned his attention to her, for the first time his expression becoming coolly dismissive. "And you are Eleanor Walsh. I teach school here." "Ah, the lady friend." Cartwright's tone made the words sound like an accusation. "Dr. Stone, surely you realize that you're wasting your talents out here, playing house with a school teacher while people die in Denver for lack of skilled surgeons." Marcus's hands tightened on his reins. "Dr. Cartwright, I appreciate the offer, but my answer is no." "Is it because of what happened at Fort Carson? Because I assure you, no one blames you for those deaths. Cholera is a difficult disease." "Don't." The word came out sharp enough to cut. Just don't. Marcus, Cartwright continued relentlessly, hiding out here won't bring them back. But using your skills where they're most needed might give their deaths meaning. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Marcus sat his horse face carved from stone, while Nora watched with growing alarm. I'll need time to consider it, Marcus said finally. Of course, but don't take too long. The position won't remain open indefinitely. Cartwright touched his hat brim. Good day, Dr. Stone, Miss Walsh. He rode away, leaving Marcus and Nora alone on the trail with the weight of his word hanging between them. Marcus, Nora said softly, you're not seriously considering this. Am I not? He wouldn't meet her eyes. He's right about the numbers. I could save more lives in Denver than I ever will here. Could you, or would you just be running away again? The accusation hit home. Marcus's face went white, then flushed with anger. Running away, is that what you think I've been doing? I think you've built a life here. I think you've found a way to heal not just other people but yourself. And now you're talking about throwing it all away because some man in a fancy coat made you feel guilty. It's not about guilt, it's about responsibility. No, Nora's voice was firm. It's about fear. You're afraid that if you stay here, if you let yourself be happy, you'll be betraying Anna's memory. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. There were tears in her eyes now, but her voice remained steady. I understand because I've been running too. Marcus stared at her. What are you talking about? My fiancé, the one I told you died in the war, that wasn't the whole truth. Nora's hands shook as she spoke. He did die, but not in battle. He died of pneumonia while I was nursing him. I could have saved him, Marcus. I had the knowledge of the medicines. But I hesitated, second-guessed myself. By the time I acted, it was too late. The confession hung between them like a physical thing. So when that teaching position fell through, when I found myself stranded here with nowhere else to go, part of me was relieved. Part of me thought I deserved to be exiled to the middle of nowhere building shelters from broken boards. Nora, but then I met you, and I watched you choose to save Tommy despite your fear. I watched you fight your way back to being a doctor because it was the right thing to do. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Don't you see? We've both been given a second chance. Don't throw yours away because some stranger thinks you owe the world more than you owe yourself. Marcus sat his horse in silence, processing her words. The morning sun was full up now, painting the prairie in shades of gold and green. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the sound of children's laughter from the direction of the schoolhouse. What if he's right? Marcus asked quietly. What if I am being selfish? Then be selfish. Nora's voice was fierce. Be selfish enough to choose a life that makes you happy. Be selfish enough to build something lasting instead of just reacting to tragedy. And what about you if I stay? What happens to Eleanor Walsh, the woman who's been running from her mistakes? Nora was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but certain. Maybe she stops running. Maybe she builds a school and teaches children and helps a doctor save lives. Maybe she discovers that second chances are meant to be taken, not hidden from. Marcus studied her face in the morning light, the determination in her green eyes, the way her chin lifted when she was fighting for something she believed in. Somewhere along the way, this woman had become essential to him, not just as a medical assistant, but as a reminder of who he could be when he wasn't defined by his failures. The Cartwright will be back, he said. Then we'll face him together. The hospital position is a good opportunity. For someone who wants it. Do you want it? Marcus considered the question. A month ago, he might have been tempted. The chance to lose himself in the demands of a big city hospital to practice medicine without the personal connections that made each patient matter. But now he thought about Tommy Bradford's recovery smile, about the ranch hands who would have died without quick intervention, about the children in Nora's schoolhouse who called him Doc Stone and brought him pictures they'd drawn, about the woman beside him who had taught him the difference between existing and living. No, he said, I don't want it. I want this. Relief flooded Nora's face. Then that's settled. Is it because there's something else we need to talk about? She looked at him warily. What? This partnership of ours, the medical practice, the school, it works well. Yes, it does. But I think it could be more than a professional arrangement. The words hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Marcus, Nora said carefully. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you think Eleanor Walsh might be interested in becoming Eleanor Stone. If you think a former Army surgeon and a refugee teacher might be able to build something permanent together. The smile that spread across her face was brighter than the morning sun. I think, she said, that might be the best use of good lumber anyone could imagine. Marcus laughed the first time Nora had heard him truly laugh and urged his horse closer to hers. In that case, he said, reaching for her hand, I think we have some building to do. Dr. Henry Cartwright returned exactly 1 week later, riding into Millbrook with the authority of a man accustomed to getting his way. He found Marcus and Nora in the schoolhouse clinic, she teaching arithmetic to the younger children, while he examined old Pete Donnelly's arthritis. Dr. Stone, Cartwright announced from the doorway, causing every head in the room to turn. I trust you've had time to consider my offer. Marcus straightened from where he'd been testing the range of motion in Pete's shoulder. I have. Excellent. When can you be ready to travel to Denver? I can't. Cartwright's eyebrows rose. Can't or won't? Won't. Marcus's voice was calm, certain. Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm needed here. Needed? Cartwright looked around the modest schoolhouse with obvious disdain. Dr. Stone, you're treating arthritis and childhood sniffles. In Denver, you could be performing surgery that saves hundreds of lives. Maybe, but here I can save the lives that matter to me. Cartwright's expression hardened. I see. You've chosen comfort over duty. I've chosen purpose over penance. The older doctor's face flushed. Very well, but I feel obligated to point out that your medical license is technically under review. The room went very still. Even the children seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. Excuse me, Marcus's voice had gone dangerously quiet. The Military Medical Board has concerns about your departure from active duty, questions about your fitness to practice medicine. Cartwright's smile was cold. I've been attempting to resolve those concerns, but if you insist on practicing in this irregular manner, are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. A word from me could have your license suspended pending a formal review. On the other hand, accepting the Denver position would demonstrate your commitment to legitimate medical practice. Nora felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd watched Marcus rebuild his confidence, reclaim his identity as a healer. The thought of losing it now. How long? Marcus asked. For the review, 6 months, perhaps a year. And in the meantime, you would be barred from practicing medicine in any capacity. The silence stretched like a held breath. Nora could see the calculation in Marcus's eyes, the weight of impossible choices. Dr. Cartwright, she said quietly, standing up from where she'd been working with the children. Might I speak with you outside for a moment? Both men looked surprised, but Cartwright nodded curtly. If you wish. Outside the schoolhouse, Nora faced the man who was threatening to destroy everything they'd built. Dr. Cartwright, I'd like to understand something. Why are you so determined to force Dr. Stone to Denver? As I explained, his skills are needed there. No, Nora's voice was calm but firm. That's the excuse. What's the real reason? Cartwright studied her for a long moment, perhaps reassessing what he'd dismissed as a simple frontier school teacher. You are more perceptive than I gave you credit for, he said finally. The truth, please. Very well. Dr. Stone was one of the most promising surgeons I ever trained. His techniques, his instincts, his dedication, he had the potential to revolutionize frontier medicine. Cartwright's voice carried genuine regret. When he quit after the cholera outbreak, it was a tremendous loss to the medical community. And I've spent 4 years believing that loss was temporary, that he would eventually come to his senses and return to serious medical practice. Cartwright gestured toward the schoolhouse. This domestic fantasy you have created together is preventing him from fulfilling his true potential. Nora felt a flash of anger. His true potential is exactly what he's fulfilling. He's saving lives, training others, building a medical practice that serves real people in real need. He's hiding. He's healing. There's a difference. Cartwright shook his head. Miss Walsh, I can see that you care for him, but caring sometimes means letting go. Dr. Stone belongs in a place where his skills can benefit the greatest number of people. Dr. Stone belongs wherever he chooses to build a life, even if that choice is beneath his capabilities. Nora stepped closer, her eyes blazing. Dr. Cartwright, let me ask you something. In all of your years of practicing medicine, how many patients have you actually saved? I beg your pardon. Not how many surgeries you've performed or how many students you've taught. How many actual people are alive today because of your direct intervention? Cartwright's face reddened. That's an impossible question to answer precisely. Marcus can answer it. He knows the name of every person he's saved here and in the Army. He knows their families, their stories, their faces, when they realized they were going to live. Nora's voice was fierce with conviction. That's not hiding, Dr. Cartwright. That's what real medicine looks like. Idealistic nonsense. Proven results. And if you try to take that away from him, if you use bureaucratic threats to force him into a life he doesn't want. Nora paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Then you'll have to go through me first. Cartwright stared at her, perhaps seeing for the first time the steel beneath the schoolteacher's exterior. You're in love with him, he said. I'm in love with the man he's become when he's allowed to be himself. The doctor who rides through blizzards to deliver babies. The teacher who shows children that learning can heal communities. The partner who builds something lasting instead of just impressive. And you think that's enough, a few dozen patients in the middle of nowhere? I think it's everything. Cartwright was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its arrogance. You know, Miss Walsh, there was a woman like you once, a nurse named Catherine, who believed in the same idealistic vision of medicine you're describing. What happened to her? She married a doctor who chose prestige over purpose, who built an impressive career in Boston while she raised children and managed a household. Cartwright's smile was bitter. She died last winter. Pneumonia. I was so busy with my hospital duties that I barely made it home in time for the funeral. Understanding dawned in Nora's eyes. She was your wife. For 32 years. And for 32 years, she kept telling me that the most important medicine happened at the bedside, not in the boardroom. He looked toward the schoolhouse where the sound of children's laughter drifted through the windows. I never listened. It's not too late to start. For me, I think it is. Cartwright straightened his coat with sharp movements. But perhaps Dr. Stone has made the wiser choice. He turned to go, then stopped. Miss Walsh, there won't be any medical board review. Dr. Stone's license is in perfect standing. Relief flooded through her. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just don't let him forget why he became a doctor in the first place. I won't. Cartwright mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Nora standing in the afternoon sun with the weight of victory settling around her shoulders. When she returned to the schoolhouse, she found Marcus helping young Sarah Henderson practice her letters while the other children worked on their arithmetic. He looked up as she entered, question in his eyes. Is he gone? He's gone. And Marcus, you don't have to worry about your license. He was mistaken about the review. The relief on his face was worth everything she'd risked in that confrontation. What did you say to him? I told him the truth, that some things are more important than career advancement. Marcus stood, moving to where she waited by the door. And what things are those? Family, community, the chance to build something that lasts. She smiled up at him. The chance to love someone enough to fight for the life they choose. Even if that life is in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. Especially if it's in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. Marcus reached for her hands, not caring that a dozen children were watching with varying degrees of curiosity and delight. Nora Walsh, he said formally, I have a proposition for you. Another building project. Something like that. I think this town needs a permanent doctor and a permanent school, and maybe a permanent partnership between the two. What kind of partnership did you have in mind? The kind that starts with a wedding and ends with a lifetime of taking care of people together. The schoolhouse erupted in giggles and whispered excitement from the children, but Nora heard only the steady sincerity in Marcus's voice. Dr. Marcus Stone, she said solemnly, I accept your proposition. Even though it means staying in a place that most people would consider the middle of nowhere, especially because of that. Some of the best building happens far away from crowds where you have room to grow. Marcus kissed her then right there in front of God and the children and anyone else who cared to watch. And as his lips met hers, Nora thought about broken boards and good lumber, about the difference between existing and living, about the courage it took to build something that could last. Outside, the Wyoming wind whispered through the grass, carrying the promise of winter and the certainty of spring. Somewhere in town, babies were being born who would need a doctor's care and a teacher's guidance. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other people were struggling to build lives from whatever materials they could find. But here in this schoolhouse that doubled as a clinic, a woman who had arrived with nothing but determination and a man who had forgotten how to hope were creating something neither could have imagined alone. They were building a life, together. And this time the foundation was strong enough to last. 1 year later, the Millbrook School and Medical Clinic stood as the unofficial heart of the community. What had begun as Nora's desperate shelter had grown into a proper building with separate rooms for teaching and medical practice, a small surgery where Marcus could handle more complex procedures, and living quarters for the doctor and teacher who had become the town's most essential residents. Dr. Marcus Stone was known throughout Wyoming territory as the physician who would ride through any weather to attend a birth or treat an injury. Mrs. Eleanor Stone was equally renowned as the teacher who had somehow convinced 3 neighboring communities to pool resources for a proper school. But on this particular spring morning, they stood together in their garden, watching Tommy Bradford, now tall for his 9 years and healthy as a horse, demonstrate his reading skills to a group of younger children. "Hard to believe it's only been a year," Marcus set his arm around his wife's waist. Nora leaned into his warmth. "Sometimes the best building happens quickly once you have the right materials. Good lumber and good partnership. Good lumber, good partnership, and the courage to start over when everything seems impossible." Marcus smiled, thinking of the evening a month ago when he delivered the Morrison twins, or last week when Nora's students had performed Shakespeare for the entire county. Each day brought new challenges, new opportunities to use their skills in service of something larger than themselves. "Any regrets?" he asked. Nora looked around at the life they'd built, the thriving school, the busy clinic, the garden where they grew herbs for medicine and vegetables for their table. At the horizon where other settlers were building their own dreams from whatever materials they could gather. "Just one," she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I regret that it took me so long to realize that broken boards don't stay broken forever. Sometimes they just need the right carpenter to make them into something beautiful." Marcus kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her hair, in the spring air, and the contentment that came from work well done. "Well then," he said, "I guess we better keep building." And together they did. Thank you for joining us on this journey of healing hearts and second chances. If you enjoyed this story of love conquering past trauma in the Old West, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. What did you think of Marcus and Nora's love story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most beautiful things are built from broken pieces made strong again.